States was in this position with NATO saying, how can we utilize the language that is on our side, the Turkic language and the Turkic heritage and Islam, to sway them and get them further from Russia and on our side so that we can turn them into NATO members, put our military base there, and also to dominate their energy, the rich energy resources sector. Well, the plan that was conceived and put in place, which was the continuation of Operation Gladio, original Operation Gladio, was that we would use Islam and we would use language and we continue the previous Operation Gladio tactics in order to sway these countries, bring them to our side, put them in our camp, put our military bases, etc., which we started doing. Starting in 1996, with the help of the United States, under United States direction, we helped open over 350 mosques in Azerbaijan and other countries in the region. We started putting together some of these NGOs for supposed development or education or human rights or feminism, whatever you want to call it, and we started putting our operatives on the ground in place in those countries. And we also, with the help of Turkish paramilitary units under NATO, we took over the Chechen faction and said, we are going to supply them with arms and direct them and train them and create this terror incidents and separation from the Russian side using our Chechen paramilitary units. Further, we put in place some new religious, like Al-Qaeda, supposed Islam-oriented, or people who misuse Islam for terrorism purposes. And if you go alphabetically through the list, you see a lot of those. All of those were, again, supplemented, directed, armed by the United States, NATO operatives, and also pawn countries such as Turkey. We actually put together some assassination attempts in the region. Initially, for example, in Azerbaijan, Aliyev, the father Aliyev, not the current president, was still being pro-Russian, and he initially refused to side with Turkey and NATO and the United States. Some of these tactics initially didn't work. What did we do? We took some of the mafia units from Turkey and hooked Aliyev's son and Aliyev's brother in major gambling scandal where they ended up owing something like $10 or $15 million. And then we publicized that scandal, to weaken Aliyev. Not only that, there were 2 or 3 assassination attempts that were carried out again. And if you go and Google this, you see that culprits were some Turkish paramilitary units. These were unsuccessful attempts. So we put all sorts of pressures. And finally, by 1997, 1998, we took over Azerbaijan. As you know, Azerbaijan has been a candidate for NATO member for years. And they have been spending billions of dollars to fulfill the requirements to become a full-fledged NATO member. And of course, we used to have Manas Air Base, and also what we put in place in Kyrgyzstan. So these were the operations, and a lot of things were involved in this, from drug trafficking, money laundering, bribery, assassination attempts, coup attempts, synthetic terror events in the region. All of these were being conducted under NATO's Operation Gladio, the next phase being post-Cold War, post-fall of Soviet Union.
And of course, it involves a lot of false flag stuff. I mean, the original Gladio, I remember, had something to do with some bombings of train stations in Italy, for example.
Absolutely.
For various political reasons. Isn't the false flag terror operation just sort of bread and butter to these people? Absolutely, because we have firsthand experience with this. Look what 9/11 allowed happen. We had, if you remember, PNAC, the Project for New American Century, in 1999, 2000, we had the shadow government and the government powers get together and say, how do we establish our dominance? And people can go and look up PNAC, PNAC. They put together this paper and said, with the fall of the Soviet Union, here we have this great opportunity to become world power, We want to be an empire. However,
in order to make this happen, we need the public support in these, especially in the United States, but to a certain degree in other European countries. See, because psychologically speaking, after the fall of the Soviet Union, suddenly you had this missing motivation for the government to expand for military-industrial complex expenditure, buying, investing trillions of dollars in weapons, because for almost half a century, those activities, those expenditures, those operations were justified by the fear-mongering that communists are out there, they are about to take over the world. And if we don't do this as the United States, they're going to come and take over. We're going to be invaded by the Russians. We're going to be invaded even by Cubans. So we have to stockpile all these weapons and nuclear weapons. And people said, okay, in the United States, they are so scary. Do what you must to protect us. Well, you remove that threat in 1991. You're looking at the people, the psychology of people saying, whew, that's great. Now that we don't have that big, bad, evil Soviet Union and the Cold War and communists to fight against, let's concentrate about some of the internal stuff, whether it's some of the things we are doing on education or, all sorts of other things, because we don't have that threat. Well, what would that mean for, let's say, the big corporations, military-industrial complex? Well, their bread and butter was the Cold War and the synthetic wars. And now we are in this situation for a brief period where we don't have that excuse to go and stockpile all these weapons, etc. Well, that was not acceptable, neither to the industry, the military-industrial complex, nor for a government that wants to be extremely big and powerful and be a police state. How do you justify all this? How do you even justify as big of a CIA? CIA's existence, creation was justified based on Cold War. Now, they have to protect that turf. And these guys, when they wrote this paper for PNAC, that was exactly what they said. They said, what we need to do is we need to get the Americans and the other countries in Europe to say there is a threat and it is deadly. It is so dangerous, it's imminent, okay? And we need to, it doesn't exist. We need to create this. Short of a catastrophic event, to show people that there is even a bigger monster than Soviet Union, even worse than communists, some horrifying event has to take place. Lo and behold, a year later, we had 9/11 happening here. The biggest terrorist event on our soil, okay? The one before that, the only one we had was Pearl Harbor. Well, 3,000 people lost their lives, and it was all over the media for months and months, the horror of it. And it accomplished everything PNAC wanted. It accomplished a huge government. We ended up creating TSA, Department of Homeland Security, several other intelligence agencies. We suspended our First Amendment right. We basically suspended the entire Constitution. We justified, right now, how do you think they are justifying NSA's illegal surveillance? There are these big bad terrorists. And we made that threat much bigger than even communists. See, because with the communists, with the Soviet Union, you could at least point to a country or countries and say, here's their power in terms of military power, here is their number, here's where they are, and say this is the enemy. With this, we created this invisible enemy that we could say they are all over the world. There may be hundreds of millions of them, there may be 3 of them. There is no way in this world for us to have an incident where we have the enemy eliminated. With the Soviet Union, the Cold War ended, boom, it went away, and it was a huge panic moment for the military-industrial complex and the big government. Now, why can't we create an enemy that could never, ever be eliminated? Because how could you point out and say, today we eliminated the last member of Al-Qaeda, Lou. So the war on terror officially ends today because we have eliminated Al-Qaeda completely. There are no Al-Qaeda fetuses in anybody's womb. Okay, we even eliminated those. Thus, as of today, everybody celebrate. We're going to eliminate Department of Homeland Security. We're going to end the surveillance because we have eliminated the terrorism and Al-Qaeda. That will never happen, right, Lou? Because we have this perpetual enemy and situation that we have created. It's invisible. It doesn't have a particular location or country. They are supposedly all over the world. And we don't even have anything to really measure the strength. The government says they can blow us up and we don't know if it's true or not. How could you prove something that doesn't exist? How do you prove that it doesn't exist and it doesn't exist? So this was, again, consistent with the Operation Gladio, the Stage B after the Soviet Union. And as you said, for that, a lot of things had to take place in the United States and continue to take place here, and to a very small degree, maybe in Europe. We had some incidents in the United Kingdom too. And if you look at the powers, the actors involved in Operation Gladio, post-Soviet Union, basically you're just going to see United States, United Kingdom, and that is the both Pentagon, and United Kingdom, and you have NATO. And they so far have been milking the threat of an invisible enemy that cannot be estimated in terms of power, location, or numbers, and do a lot of things. Every single war we have had since 9/11 has been justified based on 9/11. Everything has to do with the Islamic terrorism and Al-Qaeda. And again, they are invisible. As I always ask people, I say, if you read in the newspaper, they say, United States with the drone killed 20 Al-Qaeda members in Yemen. Nobody asks, how is it established that they are Al-Qaeda members? Because does anyone go after the fact, look at the bodies, turn over the corpses, take out their IDs? There it is. There's an ID here. It says, I'm an Al-Qaeda member. Here's my photo, and here's my Al-Qaeda number. Well, how do you identify someone as Al-Qaeda member that with the drone to go and kill? How do you identify that you have killed the right people and report with such confidence? And that's our, of course, mainstream media. And as you know, in this book, there are sections that talks about the U.S. mainstream media especially and how they operate.
Sibel, if people have not heard you before or have not read you before and are listening today, they get just a taste of just how much you know, how wise you are, how courageous you are, and all of us who are concerned about our diminishing freedoms and concerned about the warfare state and the surveillance state and the police state and all the rest of the horrors headquartered in Washington, D.C., we all owe you a debt of gratitude. And I want to, of course, highly recommend your first book, Classified Woman, the Sibel Edmonds Story, tremendous autobiography. But especially, everybody, get a copy of The Lone Gladio, read it. First of all, it's very, very interesting just as a novel, but it tells the truth about all the horrors that are going on under the table thanks to the government and its allies in the crony capitalist military-industrial complex, the Pentagon, the CIA, the NSA, all the various so-called intelligence agencies. Their object is global domination. I mean, they actually intend to run every single part of the world, and we're just the cash cows for them, and we're to be crushed. If we say boo, that's what they like. So Sibel Edmonds is the kind of person who refuses to be crushed, won't be intimidated, tells the truth, alerts Americans who have the brains to listen to her about the things that are going on. So get a copy of The Lone Gladio, get a copy of Classified Woman. Sibel, thanks so much for everything you're doing. Thanks for coming on the show today. And all I can tell you is just keep it up.
Thank you for having me back. And let me congratulate you for a great job you've been doing at Lou Rockwell's site, because I visited every day, and we always include your articles, and there are so many of them that are on exact same issues that we just discussed in our news roundup, which we do several times a week, because they all address the whole issue of the imperialism and also the issue of the police state, the national security state, and a big government that is there not for the interest of the people. So thank you very much for all you do, and thanks for having me on again, Lou.
Thank you, Sibel. Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Well, thanks so much for listening to the Lou Rockwell Show today. Take a look at all the podcasts. There have been hundreds of them. There's a link on the LRC front page. Thank you.